The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Kathy Wyatt.
So many choices, so little time and money. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the college search. Joining us to talk more about this are Judy Quest, she is a college counselor. Dr. Rebecca Riley, she is the mother of a high school junior, and the junior herself is here, daughter Annie, all of whom are associated with Duchesne Academy of the Sacred Heart here in Omaha. Thank you all so much for joining us. Welcome to the program. Judy, we're going to go ahead and start with you, and I think the best question to start with is, what is the most important thing for anyone to keep in mind when looking for the right college?
Well, the most important thing is the match. And I never start with a student with how can you get into Harvard or how can you get into any university. It's more important that it's the match, and there's three parts to the match. There is the program match, if a student knows what she wants to major in, and there's the financial match for the family, but then there's also the social match. Is she going to feel comfortable at a certain university with their culture?
Okay, and of course timing is really of the essence in all of this. We tend to procrastinate sometimes, and this is certainly not an area that we're able to do that. Now, we do have a graphic for folks. It's kind of a timeline that you have put together for parents and students, so if we could go to that graphic and you walk us through that.
Well, during junior year, the second half of junior year, I kind of look at it as three different very essential things. One is what I call shopping year. I mean, you need to really get out there and find out what's out there for a student and what it is that you're looking for. So good shopping, and I have some resources for that at the end of the program. Then secondly, to get the testing started. All colleges in this country now take the ACT and the SAT, so students are advised to take both in the spring of their junior year, and then also to start working on their credentials, their resume, their recommendations.
Okay, and that's junior year, and then we do have another one here, the second one up. And this is the summer prior to their senior year.
In the summer of a senior year, it's a good time to visit campuses and to get your list of the schools where you'd really like to apply pretty much firmed up.
Okay, and then finally, as a student is entering his or her senior year, what are the things that we really should be keeping in mind there?
Well, I really advise students to have a good idea where they're going to apply so that they know the parts and pieces that they'll need to get together for their applications. And I recommend that students get everything done by November 1st. Now, some people think that might be a little early, but that way you're not missing any deadlines. There are some amazingly early deadlines, even for public schools around here.
Okay, very, very practical and useful information. And one of the other things I was noticing that you've developed is something called the yardstick is first.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, the yardstick is a tool that I help the student carry throughout the whole process. And like I said, before I talk to a student about where he or she is going to be applying, I talk to them about what is it that you want from your college experience. Things like program, distance, price, size. Are you an athlete? Do you want to do travel abroad? put all of those things down and then start to look at schools and see how they match up to this yardstick.
And that kind of then leads us into this whole concept that you call the mom and pop quiz, which is really more of a self-assessment.
Right.
And we have a graphic for that as well, so that our viewers can take a look at that, maybe take some notes as we're walking through that.
I would like to tell people that on the Duchenne Academy website, my entire handbook is on there, and there are many quizzes for students and parents to help develop what it is that is the most critical for a student in their choice. And I highly recommend that parents share their value systems with their children. And early on, what is it that they want? And knowing their child and knowing a lot more about life for their child to gain through their college years.
Well, and obviously having a very good counselor who's been around for a little while, who really does take a vested interest in the students. You know, that's key too. You can have all sorts of resource information at your fingertips, but if you don't have that individual who not only believes in the resource information, but more importantly believes in your child, that's half the battle. So if you could, before we go ahead and talk with Dr. Riley, just give us a little bit of background. Where have you come from to be where you are now as a counselor?
Well, I've been a counselor since 1973, but not always in high school. And I started teaching high school, then was a counselor for 5 years. Then I was a career counselor at a big corporation. I worked for the State Department of Education, and now I've been back in high school counseling for 13 years. And I don't know why I ever left high school counseling, because this generation is wonderful. But I have many colleagues all over the state that are amazing resources for students. And if they don't take the opportunity to use those people's expertise, they're really missing out.
Well, and obviously students and parents alike very fortunate to have someone like you available to them to help walk them through the process. And Dr. Riley, you are one such person. Have been working a little bit with Judy on Annie's future here. And you know, you've been listening a lot to what she's had to say. Tell us what you have found so far in this process to be the most helpful.
Well, I have to echo what you said about how lucky we are to have Judy that we're able to work with. She really has a timetable figured out, and getting organized and getting started has been a big step, because we do tend to be procrastinators, and so saying, yes, it's junior year, it's time to do this, has really helped. We kind of accidentally did a couple of college visits during the fall because we happened to be in cities where there were schools that Annie thought she might be interested in. We went to one of them and she found she didn't like it at all. We went to another and she liked it quite a bit. And then my husband and I have been through the mom and pop quiz, and I think that was really helpful for us to make sure that we were on the same page. And then once we'd done that, then we could begin to talk to Annie a little bit about whether her expectations were matching with ours.
And I think that's really important, because oftentimes when we think we're really helping somebody, what we're doing is we're kind of doing for them, and we are becoming them. So we're seeing it through our eyes rather than the person who's actually going to be going through those experiences firsthand. In what you have gone through thus far, what has been the biggest aha, or I really didn't know that? That was very useful information for me.
Well, I think one of the things that I found from our visits was that one of the things that makes or breaks an experience is who does your child's tour and information session. And I've said that to several parents who've been through this process before, and they all said, oh yes. And I didn't really realize that there's, you know, if there's some place that Annie really thinks she wants to go and we have a bad experience there, we may have to go back another time if there's somebody who just didn't really quite make us feel comfortable there.
Okay, and Judy, and thank you for sharing that, Judy. So for those parents who are watching and they're picking up the phone to schedule that visit, which you have said over and over again is very, very important to do, is there some particular person they should be asking for? Are there questions that they should ask prior to getting onto location so that some of that becomes a little bit easier and your tour is more productive?
Well, a lot of that is done online now, and you can either call or they have a sign up. But what I really want for the students is that they go on the official tour, go on to the official information session, because even if they have good friends that go to a school, or if they have a sister or brother, just hanging out with them on campus doesn't really answer the questions particular to that student. Okay. And so that's good, but what Dr. Riley said is so true about the difference, and I try to talk to colleges about this, but I mean, and they try to train students, but if a school seems good in every other way, but the tour guide isn't very enthusiastic, it is so important to go back.
Okay.
But another thing that Dr. Riley said that I think is interesting is that if you go to a school and don't like it, that's just as good a visit, because then they can come back to the school counselor and say, boy, I didn't like that school because it was too small, too big, too far away from home. And then it helps to focus their search to schools that might be more appropriate.
Okay, excellent. Annie, we've been talking a lot about you during this interview. It's time we talk with you a little bit. I'm just curious, what's going through your head right now?
That I have a lot to do before next year.
And tell me, in all seriousness now, you know, obviously you're very involved with the school and doing very, very well there. How on earth, for those students who are watching and thinking, okay, I'm going to listen to her because we'll see how she's doing with all this, how do you find a balance of maintaining the course that you're currently on and yet needing to look ahead to where it is that you want to be?
Well, one of the nice things at Duchesne is that we have a junior seminar class where we go and we talk with Mrs. Quest, and she gives us advice about what sites we should look at and what we should search for. And a lot of it we can do, like a lot of the visits can happen on a break, or you can take days off of school. And so a lot of it is just finding free time to look at different places where you're interested and trying to figure out what you want to do.
Okay, excellent. Now, you said that, and your mom has said you've been on a few visits. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about those a little bit. You know, we don't need to mention where you've been, but give us, you know, I went to a smaller one, or I went to a larger one, or walk us through that experience a little bit.
I went to a small college in Texas this summer, and I didn't really like it because it didn't have my major, was the first thing. But Mom wanted to go for a little bit of practice, and it wasn't a really nice experience because they kind of lectured you, and so I knew I really didn't want to go to this college. But then I went to a big college in DC over Halloween break, and was able to look around, and all the people were really enthusiastic, and I realized that that's one of the places I might really want to be.
Okay, and sticking with this whole visit notion, Judy, you know, we're doing some traveling here. For people to go all the way to Texas just to kind of get a sense for what a college visit is about, there are going to be people that are watching that are going to say, that is great, and I'm so happy for the Rileys, but I'd really like my son to go to Texas too. I just can't afford to be making all of these trips.
Right.
What would you tell those families whose son or daughter really, I think, would excel in a certain area or place, and that is what their major is going to entail, but they can't afford to get there ahead of actually sending their child?
That is a very typical situation for lots of families. And what I really suggest, there are, within a day trip of Omaha, representative colleges of every variety. And I say, just because you're not going to go all over the country to look, that's no excuse. You still need to go on some visits. A visit here to UNO or to Lincoln if they're thinking about a big school, Creighton, Doane College for smaller schools, or Grinnell or Drake. I mean, many places within a easy day trip. And students can go with their parents, which is what I kind of prefer, or with their girlfriends, or a group of kids.
Okay. So even folks who live on the other side of the state can find some schools that are
Absolutely.
nearby, whether it's really what they're looking for or not, it gives them an idea
Right.
of what to expect. And I think that is really, really good advice. Now, Annie, I'm going to jump back over to you again. You had mentioned your major. What is it that you're interested in?
International diplomacy, which is where you go and you work with either the United Nations or with the United States Department of State in other countries and in their United States Embassy.
And how long has this been an interest to you, and where did all this come from?
It's been an interest of mine for probably 3 years now. My aunt was a international trade person who worked at a bank where she spoke French and English and worked with people in Africa. And she was telling me about her experiences and her friends who went to do the things that I want to do. And I found that that was something that I was really, really interested in.
And how do you find, not only from your parents' perspective, but your family's perspective, what kind of feeling are you getting from folks with a major like that? That's kind of an uncommon major, not something you hear about every day. And so how's that been for you?
Well, a lot of my family is scared that I would go into places that would be unsafe. But people think it's pretty interesting and don't really know what to say because they don't know exactly what it is, so they can't ask me a lot about it.
Well, and probably engaging in those conversations really is good for both sides. You, because you're able to understand it a little bit more through explanation, and them because they see how excited you are about trying something new like that. So, well, very, very good. Okay, now Judy, we're going to get back to you and we're going to talk money a little bit more, because that is, especially with the economy being the way it is, there are folks out there whose children have great potential to go on to higher learning, but for one reason or another, we've lost a job. You know, the opportunities just aren't what they used to be. And that window, you know, we keep hearing that the economy may get a little bit better next year or the following year. Maybe we won't feel the effects for a few more years down the road. Before we get into dollars and cents across the state of Nebraska, shed a little bit of realistic hope on those families that are going through that right now.
Well, we're very lucky in the state of Nebraska because really anyone can go to one of our state universities. And if through the federal aid process and through the opportunities here in Nebraska, the tuition at our state universities and colleges can be even waived if people do not have the money. So there are wonderful opportunities here in the state. And another thing I would just suggest to people is that they be creative and really look. There are Midwest Student Exchange states where Nebraska students can get a lower rate. There are other just very nice opportunities for a great variety of schools. I'm not just talking about our big state universities, smaller schools as well as larger schools. For instance, in the state of Missouri, you can, after 1 year of being in the state, going as a student, which is very unusual, you can become a Missouri resident. Not that we want our students to be leaving our state, but if there is a program in the state of Missouri at one of their universities, you can be paying after 1 year in-state tuition there. So, I mean, there are so many things that people can really avail themselves of, different types of programs. Another thing that some people are able to do is to go to 2 places at once. For instance, here in Omaha, I'm sure it's true other places in the state, you can go here to UNO and to Metropolitan College at the same time, and the tuition is much less there, get some of your core requirements in there, even while going to UNO. So, I mean, if people are inquisitive, there are ways.
I think part of my concern here really is for those folks who are not quite at the level of needing the assistance, but they're also not at the level of being able to pay out of pocket. And maybe they're only going to be in that situation for a while, or maybe that's just where they are. And I know that that becomes a concern for people too, because they go to fill out the financial applications and they think, oh my gosh, and then they start to feel guilty because, well, gosh, I make more than that. So that somewhat disqualifies them. But again, they don't make enough to be able to afford what it is that you're talking about. Do you find that often? And what would you suggest to those folks?
Well, yes, I do. But there are, and those types of students are looking more toward merit-based scholarships where the family finances aren't as much of a factor. And the good news, when I was going to college many years ago, it was kind of the super good students and the good athletes could get great money, and the rest of the people, well, whatever. Now there are wonderful scholarships for people who have special talents, music, art, sports, and students who have been community volunteers and community and leaders within their high school. There are wonderful scholarships, and people are being recruited and rewarded for their great years in high school. And the key to that is a good resume, very detailed, so that colleges can award students nice opportunities. And then there are also scholarships that are available from many organizations, local things like the Rotary, the Lions Club, national scholarships like Kohl's. I just did some recommendations today for Kohl's Kids Who Care, or Target, or many parents' employers have scholarships. So a very thorough search of those types of scholarships is worthwhile too.
Well, and Dr. Riley and Annie, I want to talk to you a little bit because this is a very detailed process. This is a lot of work. We heard about how we have to write letters and how we have to do these self-assessments, and oh my gosh, that will mean that we have to communicate with one another. And you know, always trying to look at the positive side of things. I would imagine that this is really prompting the two of you to get into more discussions than perhaps you normally would have. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you talk all the time anyway, which is great, but it's not only A, an opportunity for you to engage in more conversation, but B, an opportunity to learn a little bit more about one another as you're going through this whole process. I mean, what better than to talk to your child about their hopes and dreams and be able to, you know, put that down on paper and work, you know, in partnership with them. So I'll start with you, Dr. Riley. Tell us a little bit about how this has affected your relationship with Annie.
Well, it has actually been very nice because we have been able so far, because we haven't run across too many things where we've butted heads, but we've been able to talk a little bit about what I see as realistic, what she sees as realistic. Her dad is involved in those conversations as well, and we haven't had to sit down and do it all in one night. And that's one of the nice things. We can talk about a couple of things. We actually had a conversation when we were ice skating. And she and her sister were taking turns ice skating with me. And so I talked to Annie when I was skating with her about college, and then she'd go off and skate, and her sister would skate with me for a while, and then when Annie would come back, we'd cover something else. But it's nice because it doesn't have to be intense and confrontational. We can bat things back and forth a little bit. Okay. And our experience of going through the visits together, because I've been the one with her on the 2 visits she's made so far, has also been interesting, just because we're able to exchange impressions after we get done with the visit.
Okay, Annie, is that about a fair assessment, do you think? And what would you add to that about your relationship with your mom and your dad?
I agree with everything she said, and it really has made me realize how much I kind of depend on my parents, because all teenagers like to think that they're really independent and they don't need it. But as strange as it sounds, it's like nice to have mom with me on the trips because she knows me, and if I get my head too far in the clouds thinking about things that wouldn't be practical, she tells me I probably wouldn't like to do that. And so we get to talk, and I get to, it's really nice to be able to have a voice and be able to talk back and finding out exactly what it is that I want.
Very good. Okay, Dr. Riley, a lot of parents watching. Any advice that you would give to any one parent, and I think specifically talking to those folks who want very much to have their son or daughter go, but are concerned because of either finances or something else that they may see as a roadblock. What would your advice be to those parents out there?
My advice would be to start looking now, because as Mrs. Quest was saying, there are lots and lots of opportunities, but they may not be on the first page of the Barron's College Handbook. And so you may just have to look and ask questions, and I think the more time you have to do that, the more likely you are to come up with a plan that will work for you.
Okay, excellent. And Annie, for all those juniors out there who are juggling the same kind of stuff you're juggling and might feel defeated from time to time, this can get overwhelming in a hurry, and it sounds like you've mapped things out very, very well, but it can still become overwhelming. What would you say to your fellow juniors who are watching as far as, kind of that hang in there?
Well, it does seem really scary at first, but if you put little steps of doing things like getting a recommendation or finding like what kind of colleges or where you want to look, if you break it down, it's not as scary as it was.
Okay. And so you're doing okay now with all of this?
Yeah, it still seems like a big task, but I'm getting there.
Okay. And Judy, you have been a great resource in and of yourself today, but you, I know, have just a lengthy list of websites to really get people going. We have very, very little time before we go to the websites you picked. And so in about 30 seconds, if you could tell us, if someone senses, there are a lot of phenomenal counselors out there, but if someone senses that maybe their counselor isn't quite the right fit for the student, what would the call be that they would make?
Well, I think Education Quest, and there are several offices throughout the state, is a wonderful resource, helping people find money, but also helping people do the college search process. And it's a free service. I highly recommend it.
Okay, and there's actually going to be a person that picks up that phone.
Absolutely.
And talks to you. Can you set appointments with these
Yes,
people?
absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Because
Absolutely.
even the best of counselors, as you know, depending on the size of the school and the needs of the students, can get overwhelmed in a hurry too. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Now, with every program, we do have some resources. You did pick some really good websites for us that we want to put up on the screen now for folks. So if we could go to that. They are www.educationquest.org, www.collegeboard.com, and www.fastweb.com. Ladies, thank you so much for coming in today. Lots of good information. We wish you the best of luck. Riley's will be following up with you to see how things go. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.